Oh, wow. Okay. I think people are gonna get mad. Yep, probably. Hey, so previously I said that Jurassic Park was one of the worst things I've ever read. And yeah, I stand by that. Okay, it's not that bad. I will get into why I think it's one of the worst things I personally, me, myself, and I have ever read. I wanted to read this very famous work by Michael Crichton in the month of October 2024 because I have dinophobia. And if you're not familiar with what that is a phobia of dinosaurs, mostly carried by children. I have had this phobia for as long as I can remember. I am genuinely terrified of these creepy little things. Not so much anymore, which we'll get to, but I used to not be able to go into a Target and walk down the toy aisle without having an actual panic attack. I would cry, I would sweat, I would literally start hyperventilating and feel myself fall into a stress-induced panic because of these creatures. So I thought, wow, that's the perfect thing to scare me, is this book that kind of started it all, right? But to my utter shock and awe, didn't scare me. Didn't even come close. Actually helped cure a lot of my dinophobia. I'm still not gonna go to Universal like anytime soon probably, but this was a big help in my step forward of getting over it. Now, just because I didn't like this book does not mean I don't recognize how innovative it is. I think Michael Crichton is a brilliant author. I think that he has some of the best ideas across all of horror thriller media. But just, at least with this one, the execution is not there. And that comes in the form of the characters being extremely one-dimensional, the editing choices, the absolute rambling, the lack really of foreshadowing, and mostly just telling us things instead of showing us things, which is a shame because this is an iconic story and I don't think that anybody can say otherwise. So without further ado, I want to jump right on into it. As you can see, I really took it seriously when I read this book. I wanted to love it. I wanted to give it the fairest shot in the world. And I feel like I did, to be perfectly honest with you. I was expecting to go in terrified, which maybe that puts me at a little bit of a bias, but I wanted to keep an open mind. So I kept track of things. So yellow is lore dumps, the purple is information on animals, the pink is things to remember, the green was kind of like a, oh, whoa, kind of thing, you know, that feeling you get when you're reading something and you're like, wow. And then arguably my favorite is the brown, which highlights some of the best death scenes I have ever read in literature. I think a lot of the times we excuse writing styles because the author is acclaimed or iconic or whatever have you. Just because something is innovative does not automatically make it good. It doesn't make it a paragon of literature. And I think that that's kind of what happened here with Michael Crichton, is because we loved the movie so much. To be fair to Michael Crichton, this became a New York Times bestseller in 1990, the year that it was released, and it only skyrocketed further when the film was released in 1993. But kind of looking at both of those mediums, there are strengths and weaknesses that abound in both. And I kind of want to go through and highlight those just to bring attention to it. The first thing that really bothered me is the one-dimensionality of each of the characters. I don't think there's anything wrong with one-dimensional characters if they're done well. The bulk of this story, when it comes to Grant and Hammond and Malcolm and Sadler and Lex and Tim, etc., 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 takes place over the course of a weekend. So of course, like, nobody's gonna go through an insane amount of character growth over the course of like 2 to 3 days. That's just not very realistic. So for that, I do have to give Crichton some props. However, I didn't care about these characters, like none of them. I was like, okay, and? So let's go through each of them, shall we? Hammond is a villain. That is it. He is just a bad guy, and he does bad things for bad reasons. And that is his character. There is no other depth to him. It just is what it is for him. Let's take the conversation on page 223 between he and Dr. Wu as an example. Quote, "Something will force you to see reason and to sell your drug at a lower cost. From a business standpoint, that makes helping mankind a very risky business. Personally, I would never help mankind." So he's just a money-hungry, power-hungry business mogul. That's it. Grant is the paleontologist. That's it. Sadler is his assistant. That's it. Malcolm is the mathematician who info dumps at the most inconvenient of times. That's it. Muldoon is actually certifiably insane, but very, very fun. Lex and Tim are the kids. That's it. And then you have like Gennaro and Regis, and then of course Dennis Nedry, who is, and I will hear no argument on this, the most multifaceted character in this novel, and he is in there for such a short amount of time, and it sucks because I think Michael Crichton did a bang-up job with Dennis Nedry's character.
Oh, God, it's cool to compartmentalize inside.
Dennis Nedry is something to speak on because he is all of us. He is a scourged employee who wants to make money and is really tired of being mistreated. He just kind of takes it a step further and puts everybody at risk, even though that was never his intention. His whole intention was to take these dinosaur embryos to the competitor of Hammond at the dock where he was supposed to be met and come back, and it was supposed to take like 5 to 10 minutes tops. Nothing bad was supposed to happen. Of course, something bad did happen, and that leads us to some not so great things for Mr. Dennis Nedry that I will get into. My problem is with these one-dimensional characters, like I had a really hard time rooting for anybody because they were just people, and maybe that's the thing, is they're just people, regular people in a very irregular circumstance. Maybe that was the point Crichton was trying to make. It made for a very dull read in my opinion. There was an instance with Lex. She is the youngest of the two children. She likes baseball, and that is her most defining personality trait. She teases a T-Rex in the middle of being chased by the T-Rex. So it was kind of weird to me. I don't have kids. Like maybe this is a thing, but it was really odd and read really strangely to me that Lex, who is being chased by a T-Rex, which, by the way, they're on a boat in this scene. They're on a boat in the middle of a lake, and the T-Rex is swimming after them, and they seem to have outrun them and to evaded, but Lex looks back at the T-Rex and says, "Nah, nah, 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 nah." That was really odd, and I cringed, and I was like, would a child, nah, 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 a T-Rex in the middle of a fight for her life? I don't know, but to me, it just seems a little weird and a little bit odd. I mean, kind of going back to Hammond being the villain, a villain always needs a foil, which would be Alan Grant in the form of the hero caricature. Alan Grant does nothing wrong. He does absolutely everything right. He is almost inhumanly resourceful for these children. He is able to accomplish everything he sets his mind to in this book. It's kind of very lucky for him that that gets to happen for him. It's kind of weird because he is the only one who doesn't necessarily seem to struggle all that much, because everything just seems to work out. And if something is not working out for him, give it like a minute or, in this case, a page, and eventually it will work out. A good example of that is actually when he is trying to escape from the raptors on pages 398. He gets this idea to inject these eggs with a poison and roll them to the raptors to see if they will eat them. The raptor that he is after in this particular case ignored the first 2 eggs, and of course there's like a tension build, and then on the 3rd egg, he eats it and he dies, which we will also get into because I laughed really hard. We'll get there. And one of the characters that I felt was really thrown away was Ellie Sattler. She's cool. She is like a Cretaceous botanist, and she knows about all of these different plants, and she is like a super high up in her field, and they make, you know, comments about that, like, oh, she's just a woman, and Grant is sure to chime in and say, actually, she has all of these credentials and she's super, super smart. But in the book, she rarely serves a purpose. She's just kind of there. She just kind of fills up space. And that sucked. I was like really looking for... I saw the movie first, so I was expecting movie Ellie Sattler, right? And again, I know that that's not fair, I know, but I'm a human being, okay? I was expecting some kind of characterization, and instead I got person to fill up space, which was a really missed opportunity because Ellie is a cool character. She's so cool, and it was just sad to see her underutilized so much. Let's dive into some of the editing choices in here, because there is a lot of telling versus showing, and it's really upsetting to me. The best example I have that made me actually groan audibly and put the book down for several minutes was on page 266. Grant, Lex, and Tim have just escaped this horrific thing. They're trying to make their way back to the control room and to safety because they're stuck in the park with a bunch of dinosaurs, which is terrifying. But they finally find their way to some safety to get some sleep. On page 266, I wonder if there's anything to eat, Lex said. Just hay. Grant broke open a bale and spread it around on the concrete. The hay in the center was warm. They lay down, feeling the warmth. Lex curled up beside him and closed her eyes. Tim put his arm around her. He heard the sauropods trumpeting softly in the distance. Neither child spoke. They were almost immediately snoring. Grant raised his arm to look at his watch, but it was too dark to see. He felt the warmth of the children against his own body. Grant closed his eyes and slept. I understand the rule of 3 is a thing, but I don't think it's a thing with adjectives. There had to have been another word to describe the warmth and the comfort. And I think that that's what Crichton is trying to encompass, is that it's a reprieve from the horrors that they're facing, so it's very warm and cozy and comfortable and familiar and even familial in some sense. But why is it warm? And then it's warm again, and then it's warm again. We understood. The first time it was said, we understood. Clearly this one really got to me. I don't know. And I get it, like finding words is hard. Finding synonyms to capture the exact feeling that you want can be very challenging. I just don't understand this, and a lot of it is just very choppy, short sentences, which disrupted my reading pattern because I'm sitting here trying to enjoy it, trying to relate to these characters that are so one-dimensional that I cannot find a single ounce of relatability within them. And I am told that they're warm, and that's great for them, but then I'm told again that they're warm, and I'm like, yay, that's wonderful. And then again, they are warm, and I'm like, wow, it must be really hot out there. Like, is it me? Maybe it's me, and that's fine. Maybe it's me, then and that's fine. I am cool with that. I am cool with it being me. But really? So that was a thing. That was a prime example of telling versus showing. I would have loved to have known how they were feeling and why that warmth was so important to them, because it obviously was. It was mentioned 3 times in a paragraph. Moving on. There was this habit of Grant, Lex, and Tim getting into a very serious situation, because of course there is. They're in a park full of dinosaurs. But oftentimes, before that dangerous thing came to fruition, we would have a scene in the control room between Arnold and Hammond and whomever else is there. And they would tell us before we knew, or, kind of like give us some foreshadowing of what they could go through, before we even got to know how Grant, Lex, and Tim felt about the situation. A very clear example of that was the pterodactyl cage, which, the pterodactyls are in this one, which was super cool. Grant, Lex, and Tim were making their way to the aviary, and then it cuts to the control room, and they're talking about how dangerous it is because the pterodactyls are so territorial, and the kids and Grant are not going to make it out, obviously. And it's bad that they're going there, and hopefully they live. And then it goes back to Grant, Tim, and Lex, who are talking about how nervous they are to be there, and that they're a little worried that they might not make it out. And it's like, okay, I know, you told me. I remember. It was like a page ago. And it really bummed me out, because when I am reading, I like to make guesses. I like to be on the edge of my seat. I don't like to be assured that everything is probably gonna be fine, because they're talking about, oh, these characters could die, but I see like 100 pages left in the book. I know they're not going to die. They're gonna be fine, and we're gonna move on, and it's gonna have a resolution that's okay. I want to give an example to offset that particular telling versus showing, and give you a showing versus telling. With the T-Rex scene in this book, I broke the spine. I was on the edge of my seat. I had this thing ripped open. Look at that. It was a pristine spine before that scene. And I was so scared. I was like, oh my gosh, I don't think they're gonna make it out. And it was halfway in the book. Of course they're gonna make it out, because the rest of the story has to happen. But I really could not tell because of how excellently Crichton built up the suspense. So I know that he could do it. Why didn't he do it for all the other things? It was very confusing. It made for a very confusing read, because half the time I didn't know how to feel. I went back and forth so many times between loving this book and absolutely despising that I chose to read it in October. I do want to give Crichton some props on research really quickly. The paleontology is not exactly accurate based on today's understanding of archaeology and how paleontologists do their digs and how things function, but the research was up to date for the 1980s. And this came out in 1990, so he had completely proper execution on what was going on and how things were being conducted. And I thought that was really great, because a lot of times some authors will not research things and just kind of put them in their book and be like, yeah, this is cool. Good for you, Michael Crichton. Thank you for doing that. One of the highest criticisms I have seen, though, for the science in this book is the whole amber thing with the with the mosquito being frozen in the amber and taking the DNA, and because half-lives exist, and half-lives would not survive as long as the book would denote. Like, it just would not be a possible situation, which makes me laugh. It is fiction. There has to be some amount of suspension of disbelief. So, but I just wanted to point that out. I thought it was really funny. Something else I thought was a little odd was the biology aspect. Again, I know that this is fiction, and I understand that these dinosaurs do not exist at this moment, and they probably did not exist as they are depicted in Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton, because we're finding out new things every single day about these creatures, like the fact that they were probably covered in feathers. But there was a moment, and it made me laugh so hard, during the egg scene where Grant is trying to escape from the velociraptors. He injects these eggs with a venom or a poison to trick the velociraptors into eating them, so that they will die and he can make a quick escape. Before this scene, they had killed another dinosaur, and the raptors came inside. They had like eaten the thing up, and on page 396, the raptors entered the room cautiously at first, sniffing the humid air, looking at the long rocking tables of eggs. The lead animal wiped its bloody jaws with the back of its forearm. Like, just the actual thought of that, because these are 6 foot tall, like, lizards, and the actual thought of it just going like don't know. I know sometimes animals will like wipe their mouths, but not like a human. And so like looking at that and thinking about it just like really made me laugh. My friend Amy, I was reading this scene with her, and she started laughing because she owns chickens, and she pictured her chickens like taking their feathered wing and like wiping like that. Anyways, it's fine. The other thing that I was confused about in the same scene on page 399, the raptor eats the egg and foamed so much at the mouth that Grant could no longer see its head. As a reminder, this animal is 6 feet tall. It's huge, okay? It's like, they describe it in the book as man-sized. It's a big animal. If something is foaming so much at the mouth that you can no longer see its head, that thing is dead. This thing was still alive, actively dying, and not dying fast enough. I genuinely didn't know how to react to that because, like, I'm not a biologist, but it seems very far-fetched that is possible. If there's a biologist watching or somebody smarter than me, please tell me if this is possible because it really made me laugh and I'm like, huh, okay. If I am being super honest, the deaths in this book is really where Crichton excelled. The death of Dennis Nedry will haunt me forever. It was horrifying. I literally sat there wide-eyed, terrified. Like, I felt the fear, my xenophobia creep into my bones while I'm reading this because I'm picturing this so vividly. It was horrifying. Oh my goodness. I don't want to describe it, but if I can find a art rendition of the scene, I will put it in the video and credit the artist below. And if you want to read it yourself, it is on page 219. Wow, it is all I can say. Like, the actual terror of Dennis Nedry in that moment was so palpable, and the sheer acceptance that he was not going to live and what he was thinking and feeling during that time was so beautifully articulated. It made me cry for him. I was like, wow, okay, that's horrible and nobody deserves that. So yeah, another great death was a little bit on the lighter side was Muldoon sending a rocket launcher at a group of velociraptors. Muldoon had just downed like a whole handle of whiskey while driving across the park looking for Grant and Lex and Tim. He was rescuing his comrade, and he launched a missile at them and blew them up. That's on page 340. It is spectacular. My husband actually, he was telling me when I started reading this book, he's like, please let me know when you get to Muldoon's part. And I was like, what part? He's like, you will know. And I did, and I told him, and he was like, that's great, right? I was like, yeah, that's awesome, actually. And then my favorite death easily was Hammond's, because he deserved it, and it was written so well. So it starts on page 426, and it is drawn out through, you know, a couple of different perspectives and a couple of different pieces of information that we were given until page 441. Pretty much everybody is back. They are waiting on a rescue squad, and Hammond takes a walk. He is on his way to his other bungalow, and he is startled by the sound of a T-Rex roaring. And he falls down this hill, to which a group of compies come and eat him up. It's horrifying because he can't really move because he's like broken his ankle after falling down this hill. And he's an older man, so it gets a little bit harder to get up and to get yourself going. And as he's being eaten alive by these compies, they're depositing this venom into his system that is like a neurotoxin, and he is starting to get a lot more calm and a lot more serene, and he's like, oh, everything is fine. And he is eaten alive by his own creations. It is absolutely a justice that Crichton served very well with his writing. I genuinely loved it. I was like, oh, that's awesome. I love it. I loved it. And I think Crichton really excels with writing horrific death scenes that keep you on the edge of your seat and make you feel something for these characters, because you're like, oh my gosh, like that's horrible, or you're like, oh, that's what you get, and that's the mark of a great author. So wow, yeah, I 10 out of 10 on the death scenes. People unfairly, myself included, compare the film and the book. They are two different pieces of media. They set out to accomplish two very different things, but I think the movie did it better. What I mean by that is the dinosaurs in Crichton's novel are way more ruthless. They are more terrifying. They are absolutely horrendous creatures that you never want to come across. Ever in a billion, million, gazillion years, you never want to meet a Crichton dinosaur. In the film, they're very cool. The T-Rex is goated as this symbol of beauty and hero almost, because you have the score, and the score is just absolutely amazing, and you have that really iconic scene at the end where the banner falls down across the T-Rex as he roars, and it's like, wow, that's amazing. But yeah, in this one, no such thing. The thing swims after you and it's horrifying. Okay. But I think what the movie did really well is it showed us these characters go through something horrendous and actually grow from it. Grant is one of the best examples. Grant in the film doesn't like children. Grant in the book does. He and the kids in Crichton's novel get along great right off the bat. In the film, not really. He has to kind of grow to tolerate them, and due to the forced proximity of their situation, he gets to know them, and he feels like, I don't know if it's like a paternal instinct for them, but he does everything in his power to protect them and bring them back safely, which is very cool to see, because yeah, in a survival situation, you would probably do that. I think that the terror of the dinosaurs in the film is okay to be downplayed a little bit, because the spectacle was just insane. Actually seeing these creatures and knowing the science and the animatronic engineering behind them makes it really cool. And even though it's not like, like in the film, I rewatched the film after I read the book, which was a very interesting experience. I spent a lot of it crying. Watching the raptors, I started laughing because they're so goofy looking, but they were still really scary. Like, some of the situations were still really scary, and like seeing that was cool. The same thing with the T-Rex. Oh my gosh, that thing is huge. Like, that animatronic is massive, and really a testament to how much passion there was for this work, which is amazing. And the pacing was just so amazing for the film. For the book, I fear that it was not. There was a lot of situations where things kind of came to a halt, mostly at Malcolm's expense, because he would start info dumping and being like, I told you so, during like very critical moments. Like, at the end of the book, the raptors are trying to break into the facility, and they're on the roof, and Malcolm decides to lecture everybody in there about why this was all a bad idea. And it's like, okay, this is not the time. Hold that thought, Malcolm. Which, he dies, by the way, in this book, spoiler, but not really if you've read Lost World, because he is in Lost World. He's the main character. So there was a retcon situation there, which is fine. Malcolm was cool, but he often interrupted and halted and sent the pacing to a stuttering stop, just because he really had to get in some words of wisdom. All in all, I feel like this book suffers from a lot of it being the pacing, the one-dimensionality of the characters, the telling more often than showing, but it really excels with some scenes of tension and fear and overall concept is amazing. I never in my wildest dreams would have been able to conceptualize a story like this. And for that, you have to give Crichton all of the credit in the world for. He did a masterful job of bringing something so terrifying to life and so iconic that it has pervaded our society. Even today, there is a Jurassic Park film being put out in 2025. That is amazing when it first began in 1993. Like, you cannot doubt or fault the iconic idea that is Jurassic Park. And on a personal note, thank you for helping me get over a lot of my dinophobia, Michael Crichton, for some of the things that the dinosaurs did, like wiping the mouth and foaming so much that you could no longer see the head, and also getting exploded by a rocket launcher. Like, some of that provided a lot of levity and made me giggle, and so now I can walk down the aisles at Target and not get scared. But I'm still not going to Universal anytime soon, probably. That's kind of my thoughts on Jurassic Park. I want to hear your thoughts as well down in the comments below. Let me know what you think. I know a lot of people consider this their favorite novel of all time, and I definitely understand why, but there are some things that I don't understand being defended, like the style of editing and the choices and the sentence structure and, you know, some of those more technical aspects. Thank you so much for joining me, my lovely readers and listeners, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.